Hey everyone. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me talk about opportunities to create virtuous reality. So I think that for me personally, I am actually not drawn to VR or AR or any other R. I think that there's a real opportunity to leverage all of our collective talents and skills and passions and interests in helping others and helping the world. And so it's just lucky that I bumped into Gabo Aurora in 2012, and that in some ways put me on a path to find VR. And together we discovered the power of VR to change lives of others. So I'm gonna just get started. My outline for this 30 minutes is we're gonna talk a little bit about my origin story and my own film school experience. I went to Emerson College and studied visual media, and so I'm gonna talk a little bit about that in a cinema for social change moment. And then making impact media before there was VR, at least in my world. Of course, people have been making VR for a very long time. Efficacy studies, right? Is it effective? How do we measure behavior change? Is that even measurable? If people fill out a survey and say they are more likely to do the right thing now that they've had this experience, are they more likely, right? And how better to negotiate your salary through VR? Who doesn't want that? Everyone take notes. How uncovering our unconscious bias, I know that was talked about earlier, and I think we can kind of explore that and dig deep into what that means and how we can do that through VR. And then my own experience, sort of through this timeline, finding empathy, fostering my own form of empathy for others and for other perspectives. So I went to Emerson College, I studied film. I went there thinking I was gonna make high art. I wanted to be an editor and like kind of mess with old footage. I used a lot of like found footage, and I'd melt it in my kitchen. I was like poking holes in it. I would make giant animations that would be real and real and real and real of 16 millimeter stacks that would be pinhole pushes, and I would sit in other classes. And I mean, honestly, I would use like, all my stuff had pinhole pushes because I'd put the, film down and I'd poke holes in it, and we'd make the holes dance and they'd spin around. It was very Canadian art. So I took this class all of a sudden. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna make a film. It's gonna, make 4 films a year. They'll go to museums, some modern museum somewhere, and people could buy it. I guess they buy the whole projector, and that'd be my like year's work. And I took this class, randomly just took a class. It's called Cinema for Social Change. And that really changed the way I looked at media. I had come from a kind of fine arts magnet school, so it was a public school, but it allowed me the opportunity to kind of explore radio and television production, and made like TV shows in the mornings for other students at that same high school. And that was very fun. I'm not showing any clips from that. So I kind of had this sort of general understanding of, mainstream movies, documentaries, maybe even homegrown movies, right? User-generated content, as it became known. And I took this class, and the guy says, one of the first days in the class says, well, one of the popular questions, so the 50th anniversary of Cannes, there was this French newspaper that asked this question to every filmmaker there. And they have, I think, 700 answers to this question. You can find out about all of them. We're gonna talk about one of them. And the question is, why do you film? Why do you make films? And this was my teacher's answer. So his name is John Vito. And I'm just gonna take a minute to read it. Normally I wouldn't read a whole slide, but in this case, I think it's relevant. So, if I choose to make films today, it is to remind myself. I'm gonna pause. Most filmmakers said, I make films for my friends, I make films as poetry, I make films to enjoy life. This is what my teacher said. And many others have reflected this. If I choose to make films today, it is to remind myself and others that there are a lot more important things than films. But how best to express this desire? Making films, watching films, reading about films is a privilege, a luxury. even unfathomable for much of the world's population. While filmmaking is but one of the means by which I assume my social responsibility, this is John talking, I'm convinced that it affords me a voice richer, more resonant, and further reaching than the one I project as a speaker or a writer. To this end, I also make films in order to get better at making films, right? So he can continue to create impact. So for me, that was sort of a light shed moment, right? All of a sudden, light bulb goes off. We can really change the lives of others. Imagine, so I go into college, I'm thinking, I'm gonna make movies for these 400 rich people that are gonna see it at this museum one time, you know? And then I take this class and I realize, actually, we could be making films that change the world. I don't have to just stop at 400 people. And this is the beginning of YouTube and Facebook's kind of, early 2000s. And there was an opportunity to speak to a big audience. If you've got a message to say, right? Well, why only tell 400 rich people? Maybe you could tell 4,000 people or 4 million people, right? Or 4 billion people. And so that really set me on a path. It made me realize that there was a bigger picture, right? We don't just have to make art for art's sake. We can make art with meaning. And so I really got into making an impact through media, and I ended up joining the Peace Corps after university, and I brought my film skills with me. And I partnered with the embassy in Dakar in Senegal, and they had a camera and this new computer that had Final Cut Pro 4 or whatever it was then, and they didn't know how to use it. So it was in the box. The whole computer was still in the Mac box. No one had opened it. And nice enough camera, it was fine at the time. You'll see how low res this video is about to be. But that was an opportunity for me to really utilize this newfound passion I had, right? I have these tools. I've got a computer, I've got a camera, I have access. I can go anywhere in the country, all over Senegal. The Peace Corps has a driver. They'll take me to any village. And so I went around Senegal, and I ended up sort of following 5 different women in Senegal. And I noticed in my own village that there was a lack of role models. So in Senegal, in West Africa, it's actually totally egalitarian. Women are doctors and lawyers, and they are in the government, and they're everything. They're part of society in every way. And in my village, that was not the case. In my village, it was pretty remote, no electricity, no running water. And I was there for so long, you get to see that these young girls, they don't really have role models. They don't see that women could become a university professor. They barely know what university means, right? And so that is so far away from just their own mindset, their own worldview. And so how can we help these young girls have role models, have a model to follow, have a path for success, right? What does success look like for a young girl in an African village? Mostly in my village, it looked like being a wife and a mom, right? But it didn't have to end there. You can do that, and you can be a member of society in a contributing way at a job. And so we followed these 5 women. And I teamed up with another Peace Corps volunteer who is now at XPRIZE and doing great things. And she was our producer, and together, and she spoke French, better than I did. And so we made this film in French, and because it's for local audiences. We made it to show girls in schools that there can be a model where you can be a wife and a mother and have a job that you love. And the 5 women we followed, of course, that's a diverse spectrum, from silver spoon to no spoon background, from religious to secular backgrounds, from parents that are open-minded to parents that are very conservative, and how they were raised. They talk about that in this film. And it was a big opportunity for these girls to realize that no matter what walk of life they came from, they could identify in some ways with one of these people. And we actually didn't just stop at the film. We ended up making sort of supplemental material, right? Workbooks, right? Ended up becoming a class, a 2-hour-long workshop. And girls, they would have, the best girls in the school, the girls that always show up to school every day, those girls, we're going to have them invited to a weekend workshop. And they can come to the Peace Corps, room with a grass roof. And they can watch this film. And and they will get to talk about it and hear from some of the women. We actually brought some of the people back so they could be part of this exchange, dialogue, right? And I'm going to show a little bit about it. I'm going to show just the first 1 minute, just to get a sense of what the topics might be. So here you go. And it is low res. I apologize. And this means she works, she lives. And this means that all the drawings you're about to see were drawn by the children of the women being interviewed. I was still an experimental filmmaker at this point. I was using children's drawings and moving them around in Photoshop. This is about a mother who's a dentist. So this child drew their mother, what they imagine their mother does at their dentist office. She's an oral surgeon, actually.
À l'école, filles comme garçons, on a les mêmes devoirs. On cherche à avoir les mêmes notes. On a les mêmes devoirs, les mêmes exercices. Donc, on devait avoir le même temps de travail pour faire nos devoirs. Parce qu'on ne dit pas, bon, les garçons ont plus de temps pour s'occuper de leurs devoirs à la maison, tout ça. On va leur donner plus de boulot. Non, c'était le même boulot. Point. Donc, vous rentrez chez vous. Si votre mère vous fait travailler juste à faire le ménage ou autre chose, vous n'avez pas le temps de faire vos devoirs. Ce n'est pas le problème de la maîtresse. Le lendemain, il vous corrige parce que vous n'avez pas fait vos devoirs. Donc, ça, c'est un obstacle.
Right? That is an obstacle. We're going to talk more about that obstacle later. Continuing on, if it'll let me. Press escape, I was told. Okay, I'm going to press it twice. We're going to go to the next slide. Sorry about that. I blame Google Slides. I hope someone tweets that. So the immersion is the best way to learn. You know, they talk about language, learning language, and they say the best way to learn Spanish. What do they say about the best way to? Anybody know what they say? The best way to learn Spanish? Love. Fall in love. All right, fall in love. Pillow talk. Marry a Mexican. That will help you learn Spanish. Totally. So, right? Immersion. Falling in love. Spending time with others. That's how you learn. Right? We have a new way to immerse ourselves. We've got VR. But this is not new. Immersion has always helped people learn. That's why there's role playing in training. You're immersing yourself in that role. Right? So now we have this new immersive technology. Okay. What immersion could teach us. What could we learn from immersion? Well, we're going to talk about 3 examples around efficacy, right? How effective is immersion at teaching us things? So we're going to talk about empowerment, knowledge retention, right? And how it can help us in medicine. So at Stanford's Virtual Human Interaction Lab, which if anyone gets the chance to go to, I would highly recommend. It's very interesting. They take it a different tact. What they do is almost social psychology. And they found that virtual reality, immersive media, is the best way to learn. This is an opportunity. This is a demo they do. A grad student made this. It's very lo-fi. You can see on the left a tree being cut down by a chainsaw. Now, this is an experience where some people go through and they're supposed to be learning about deforestation. And maybe you could make a behavior change if you learn all about deforestation. Some people go through and they read an article, New York Times article, all about it. CO2, billions of trees being cut down, logging companies, yada, yada, right? A lot of statistics. Some people go through this experiment and they watch a video. It's 8 minutes long. It's about deforestation. It's lovely. It's one of the tabs open on a laptop. That's how you experience it. And some people go through and they do a VR experience where they embody someone who is chopping down a tree with a chainsaw. Okay? And you can't get out of it. It sounds like it's cutting that wood, and it's really aggressive, and you can't let go of it. You can't stop it. It's doing it for you. Okay? And when people come out of that and they finish the article and they finish the video, what happens, the coolest thing that Stanford does at this virtual human interaction lab is they think about how do we measure it. Remember I asked the question, do people just fill out surveys and say, I'm not going to chop down trees anymore, right? No. What they do at Stanford is really interesting. So they have a facilitator with a questionnaire, right? And so the person that's doing the experiment comes up and sits down after they've done their piece. Maybe they read the article, watched the video. So the facilitator hands them the piece of paper, and every time they accidentally knock over a cup of water on the table, and there's a roll of paper towels on that table. And people that read the article and watched the video, they pull off 6 to 8 paper towels on average to clean up that water. It's a lot of paper towels, but they're trying to be nice in a way, right? You don't want to get it on paper and there's pens everywhere and trying to, oh God, let me help, 6 to 8 paper towels on average. The people that did the VR, this one low res, no story here, right? Just chop down a tree, beginning to end, chop down a tree. Those people, when the water gets spilled, they pull off 1 to 2 paper towels on average. That is quite a difference. 1 to 6. And nothing talks about how paper towels are relevant to deforestation. No one's making that connection except those people that went through this experiment. That is pretty wild, right? And that is about empowerment. All of a sudden we realize if we have the power to chop down a tree, do we have the power to not do that? Do we have the power to replace those trees? Do we have the power to slow that process down? We do. We can use less paper towels for one, right? So another amazing moment in the sort of research around efficacy and immersion or immersive learning is at a high school in China. And they did this pretty cool experiment. They took one class and they taught them a lesson. And some people in the class did the traditional lesson. It's both a lab, a practical lesson, and a theoretical lesson. So they learn about the thing and they kind of think about the thing and then they do the thing and in a very small way, at their little lab table. And half the class, they did a virtual reality, both theoretical and practical. Now, virtual reality has this unique advantage that it can be almost hyper reality, right? We have an opportunity to look at the solar system from within the solar system, not just as a model on a table, right? You can pick up Mars, see what it's really like, right? You really embody this learning. You get to step inside. And what they found was, ready for this, knowledge retention moment, okay? So after 2 weeks, they tested them after 2 weeks on this content that they learned. They learned other stuff afterwards and, went on with class. And then at the end, 2 weeks later, they get tested, okay? 90% of the students that did the VR passed the test for that lesson. 40% of the students passed the test that did it traditionally. Marked difference, right? Huge. Shouldn't all schools start rolling out VR soon? So, I'll move on. This is this is mind-blowing. When I saw this, and this is all on this path, when I got this exposure to VR, I realized kind of some of the potential, but in researching about behavior change, there is so much there. This is a little video. We're just going to watch it. It's 2 minutes long, and it's got all the words in it. I'm not going to say anything else, but this is from Duke University, and they helped paraplegics walk again.
These patients were able to regain some level of bladder control, which is very important, and also bowel function. They were able to basically, for the first time in many years, to control their routine, bathroom routine, in addition to be able to move and to feel their bodies again.
Is that behavior change or what? Really, really incredible stuff. So actually, one of the reasons I bring this up, there's plenty of other effective studies around VR. But one of the reasons I bring this piece up and this study up is that Johns Hopkins is in a unique position to cross-collaborate with other schools of high thinking, high working, and actually high delivering opportunities. And we can cross-collaborate. We can bring VR to the School of Medicine, to SAIS, to world politics, right? We can bring VR to all walks of life, and we can help people, right? Let's just wrap our head around that. Every single school, every grad program at Johns Hopkins could be better if we had some VR in the right way. I don't mean making marketing videos. Oh man, it's gonna do that thing again. This is so mean. Someone's in trouble, Google. Okay, so. And we're back. All right, so all that research led me to the conclusion that we can do more than just make marketing videos. Okay? We don't just have to tell the story of others to hope that people give us money. That is not the only way to use VR for good, in my opinion. We've seen, right? We've seen. So when I started my own company, I left Discovery Channel about 2 years ago, and I helped them think about VR and stuff. They didn't listen that much, so I started my own company. And so I wanted to explore how we could use VR as a tool. How can VR be an actual tool for helping people? And one of the first conversations we got in around that arena was with the American Association of University Women. Does anybody know the AAUW? Okay, they're pretty well known. They're the standard bearer of the curriculum for helping women in the workplace, right? How do you apply for a job? How do you better ask for a raise? How do you ask for a promotion, right? Those sort of skills are often hard to find for a lot of women in the Western world, and maybe all the world. They are hard to find because there are parts of society that teach us that boys can play in the yard and girls should stay inside, right? Did anybody know that? Anybody hear that? Brother and sister, boy can go outside, go down the block, boys can go to 6 blocks down. Girls, maybe stay in the yard, right? Well, over time, that leads to people not negotiating for their salary as well. So if you're a parent, maybe let your daughter go a few extra blocks, right? That's not the lesson, sorry. That was a side note. So what we did was we made a simulator to help women better negotiate their salaries. And we worked with the AAUW, and we co-created this with their curriculum and our sort of technology, and we ended up making a branching scenario. And what happens is you put the headset on, and you're sitting next to your HR manager. First person, you're in an office, and it's all 360 live action video, and HR manager wanders into the room and sits down at the table across from you and says, you know, I'm really excited that your manager is going to be coming in a minute, and you're going to have an opportunity to negotiate your salary. Would you like to practice a little bit with me before he comes in? And you get to spend time with your HR manager, virtual HR manager, and you get to practice. And she gives you tips and tricks and ways to kind of Well, is that number flexible? Those sort of tips. And what happens is, eventually, you get that practice. You practice those words. You say those scripts that your HR manager tells you to say, and they say it out loud. Actually, there's a teleprompter in this experience, and you're encouraged to speak out loud as you practice. And so what happens then, of course, the manager comes in, and he talks to you. You're in the virtual reality. And he makes an offer, and you can say, I don't know if that offer is exactly what I was looking for, right? Is that number flexible? And all of a sudden, you've pushed back, and then they come back with a bigger number. Because, of course, that number is flexible. Every manager knows. They're always looking for a range, right? I'll pay you $50,000 to $60,000. Let's start with 50, right? Is that number flexible? Sure, that number's flexible. Let's call it 55. 60? Sure, that sounds great, right? All of a sudden, you just shifted. Now you're on a different path. You're on a different trajectory. It's not just one time. Right? Once you've gotten that 10 more, the next time you do it, you're going to be even better, get even more, right? So you sort of build this path over your life. And one thing that's really unique about AAUW, and why I keep saying that name, is because they aren't just a textbook creator. They actually gather groups of women around the country together to do real life workshops, trainings. Okay? They come to YMCAs, they come to community centers, they go to churches, and they sit together, and the facilitators go through their curriculum with these women that want to get better. This is an audience that is dying to get better. They want to learn, right? How can they learn as much as they can so they can be better in the workplace, so they can get that job they want, they can get that promotion, they can get that raise? And so I'm just going to say real quickly that, AAUW actually just signed with 5 or 6 cities across America. I think in the city of Boston alone, they've partnered with the city of Boston to train 85,000 women over the next 5 years how to better negotiate their salaries. That is a lot of people, right? 85,000 people just in Boston. You're going to train them how to better their salaries. Wow, that's awesome. Could we do that in VR? Can we test it? Right? Can we measure it somehow? Can we find out, are these people in this group getting better salaries, not that group? Okay, sure, we can test it. It might take a few years, longitudinal test. But I think we've found kind of one of the use cases for VR to be a tool here. We do simulated learning. And the next project we took on was a corporate client, not a nonprofit, but a corporate client. And in my life's work, of course, is to do impact first, and then VR sort of third or fourth. And I think that, I was kind of weary. Corporate client, am I going to make an ad for them? And all of a sudden, what they wanted was, they wanted to help their executive leadership, big tech company, help their executive leadership better understand the lives of their own colleagues, their own coworkers, right? How do we better understand the lives of our colleagues? Is it maybe a perspective shift, right? So could we take on the perspective of another and see the world that way? And so we did that. We worked with a diversity and inclusion team at a corporate entity, and we made a film, and we made a series of films, and went on to make conversation simulators sort of in that same way as the AAUW training, around helping leaders at large companies better understand the people that work for them. This woman here, she's an Iraq War veteran. Okay, intense. Now she works at a very large tech company. Also intense, big shift. I bet her manager doesn't even know, right? What does she bring to the workplace? Well, she might bring some remnants of PTSD. Loud noises might affect her. She has alopecia. You can see she has no hair here, right? That happens when you're at war, right? And all of a sudden, that sort of stigma, her life, her visual, what she brings to work, what she presents at work is being judged. And people don't quite know where she comes from, know what her story is, know what she's been through. And it's really hard for her. And she kind of opens up about that. And you as the audience, these executives as the audience, they get to step inside her headspace, her thoughts, her fears. Why do people keep checking for my badge so many times? Right? Why are people looking at my badge all the time? Is that normal? Do I belong here? Maybe I don't belong here, right? So I have done all this empathy work, which became a term that people use now. But I've done this work, and clearly I was, trying to focus on those individual faces. Remember that first video we watched of those little girls, those young girls, and their faces, right? In some ways, that's sort of the beginning of this empathy project. And my own life has changed through all these years, Peace Corps and film school and all these things. And I wanted to just say that the work I've been able to do with Gabo here has really changed who I am as a person. I grew up Jewish in America, and to pretty liberal-leaning parents, or NPR-listening parents, and my parents saw themselves as Zionists. I mean, as a child, that wasn't a bad word in the 90s, really, not as far as I knew, and maybe it depends on what side of the wall you're on, and so I grew up Zionist youth group, go to summer camp. We weren't very religious Jews, but we were culturally Jewish, and we believed in the state of Israel. And I had this opportunity to go with Gabo to Gaza, and we got to tell a story, got to understand a story, really listen to a story in some ways about humans that live on the other side of that really big wall. And not only did it give me a new perspective, it actually changed my whole life. I sort of have the chills talking about it. I'm pretty sure I had PTSD after the trip. I couldn't talk with anybody afterwards. I couldn't relate to people. And I couldn't, it broke my worldview, right? All of a sudden, I've been taught that the Jews were the light upon nations. We're the people of the book. We're smart. We're gonna help people. We're gonna, we've got soup kitchens and all these things that I grew up with. And not to say they don't do that. They do all those things. But when you go to Gaza, you realize who David and who Goliath is today, right? Who is David and who is Goliath? Who's got the tanks and who's got the rocks, right? So all of a sudden, my worldview was flipped. I changed everything about me, changed how I move in the world. And I wanted to just show a quick 2-minute video. I know I'm getting the shepherd's crook here in a minute. But I wanted to show a 2-minute video that's a little behind the scenes of our trip in Gaza and the film we made. And I hope you all get to see it and sort of sit with it and think about it. It's really human. It's not sensational. And it's not meant to be sort of a pity party. It's truly an opportunity to spend time with a mother in Gaza and to see what that life might be like, to worry about your children, to think about your husband, and to worry about what might happen tomorrow. Okay, so that's it. That's my talk.
Okay, we have time for one question. Who's the brave, lucky person who has to ask it?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about some of your training videos. Like, is there a roll-off effect, right? So the novelty of going in VR, right? If I'm cutting down trees, right, and we're studying that, if I've gone through like, if I've done VR for 2 years, does that effect roll off over time? Or studies on that?
My short answer is yes. Longer answer is the more compelling the content, the slower that roll-off happens. So compelling content works, right? And it works if you've seen a lot of VR or if you haven't seen any of that. So I think that's a balance. And in some ways, VR is a tricky thing because it's so new that audiences are new to it, right? You've kind of hit on a thing that's happening in the VR creator space. As we think about making VR, there's different levels of audiences. Some people are like VR experts and they've seen 20 pieces and they kind of know what to do and they're not confused by the technology of it. And some people, they put it on, it's the first time ever, and they're so fascinated they can walk around or they can look around, hear sounds from all over them, and they kind of, they need a different pacing maybe. They might need a different sort of time to sit with that content in order to absorb all the technology happening and then hear about the plot, hear about the story, hear about what we're trying to say. So it is a balance, and we struggle with that balance. So as we've made these UN pieces, we actually, at the beginning, they're very slow, methodical, slow, spend time in the desert, slow. And then the Cedra comes and she talks to you and it's slow. That's real slow build up. Well, at the end of as the body of work went on, those are much faster cuts, much quicker to get to the point. And the audience at the UN had seen Clouds Over Cedra, and then they saw Waves of Grace, and then they saw Gaza, and then they saw the next one. And so that audience had that problem where they were going to roll off otherwise, right? It wasn't going to be as effective if we kept that slow pace. People might get bored. People might, okay, we get it, moving on. How do I fast forward this video I'm watching, So we have to kind of keep up with that audience, and in a lot of ways I think about it like the IMAX revolution that happened in film. So when IMAX movies first came out, they were all 20 minutes long, and they were always in science museums. And they were about Serengeti, or sharks, or something else in between. And people didn't think that they could watch a whole movie in IMAX back when IMAX first came out, right? The audience wasn't ready to watch 2 hours of that much stimulation. They thought, I'm gonna get dizzy, I'm gonna get sick, I can't handle that much information, that stimulation overload. Over time, audiences got better, the tech got better, right? IMAX projectors, screens got better. And so they kind of converged. And now, almost every movie is shot, big budget movie is shot in IMAX and down-resed to a normal movie. And so that, I think, is gonna be the same. I think that's gonna continue on, where audiences will become not so nascent. They will become more used to this technology, and so the creators won't have to allow the audiences to learn the technology on the way to learning the story.
Yeah, I just wonder, my question is more I'm trying to get at. Are there any studies that you're saying, like,
I don't have any I can only point to the past. I don't have any of them back in my back pocket, but there may be studies out there around roll-off. I just don't know the answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Barry.